By the start of the Second World War, the British Empire was the largest empire in the world and human history, covering 30% of the planet's land. With the combined efforts of its territories, the British Empire was absolutely instrumental to the Allied war effort, contributing some 15 million military personnel and vast quantities of material. Britain was the first nation to declare war on Germany 2 days after Hitler invaded Poland. Its leader, Prime Minister Winston Churchill, took a bold stance against an aggressive Hitler and refused to bend to the Nazis' demands. On the 13th of May 1940, Churchill said, "You ask, what is our policy? It is to wage war by sea, land, and air, with all our might and with all the strength that God can give us. To wage war against a monstrous tyranny. You ask, what is our aim? Victory. Victory, however long and hard the road may be." As May trudged into June, however, for the men on the ground in France, that strength started to waver. The German Blitzkrieg had taken France by surprise, and soon the Allies were scrambling to flee and overrun France via Dunkirk and the English Channel. The situation across the Channel in Britain wasn't amazing either, with the nation anticipating a shortage of supplies and even a German invasion. Then, the bombs started falling out of the sky. But just how close was Britain to keeling over in the Second World War? Was it ever holding on by a thread? In this video, we address these very questions. You've probably all heard the phrase, history is written by the victors, but as recent times have shown, it's also written by those who create the news. In the unprecedented times we're living in, it's easier than ever to get caught up in tribal echo chambers and lose the perspective of the other side. This leads to further division, hatred, and anger. I mean, just think about it. You and your neighbor might be seeing completely different information depending on the news you read. Thankfully, Ground News is attempting to solve this issue. Ground News is a first-of-its-kind website and app that allows you to compare how any news story is being covered across the political spectrum. It's a tool with easy-to-use features to help you be more confident you're getting the full picture. One of these tools is the bias distribution chart that shows which outlets are reporting the story and where they stand on the political spectrum. One of my favorite features is the blind spot feed, where you can see stories underreported by either side of the political spectrum, essentially giving you a behind-the-scenes peek at how the media really reshapes history. To escape the endless partisan media cycle, use ground.news/thefront to check it out, or click the link in the description to download the app. Of its 1939 population of 47,760,000, some 390,000 British military personnel served in 13 divisions under the British Expeditionary Force, or BEF, in the Battle of France. Between September and May 1939, over 66,000 of these people became casualties of war, with 11,000 losing their lives, 14,000 sustaining wounds, and over 41,000 taken as POWs or labelled MIA. By the 21st of May, the Germans had pressed a huge chunk of the defending Allied forces toward the coast in northwest France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, and encircled them. Between the infamous Dunkirk evacuation and subsequent evacuations from France, some 558,000 people were able to escape over the English Channel, including over 338,000 British troops. This was the vast majority of the BEF, but manpower isn't everything. In their escape, the BEF left behind tons and tons of precious material, including 435 tanks, 45,000 cars and lorries, 20,000 motorbikes, 2,500 artillery pieces, some 11,000 machine guns, 6,400 anti-tank rifles, some 77,000 tons of ammo, 415,000 tons of equipment and supplies, and 165,000 tons of fuel. If Hitler hadn't halted his advance on Dunkirk for 3 days, it's likely he would have struck Britain with a crippling blow, eradicating the BEF, which Churchill referred to as the whole root and core and brain of the British Army, and absolutely pulverizing British morale. Of course, history took a different turn, so Britain was nowhere near keeling over after the fall of France, despite losing its foothold on Europe. Back in the Isles, the British could see the war coming long before Hitler invaded Poland. The government understood that war of any caliber, let alone a world war, was an expensive endeavor. They also understood that Britain relied heavily on imports and sourced around 70% of its food from overseas. Right from the start of the war, the Germans attacked British merchant shipping with warships and U-boats in what became the Battle of the Atlantic, putting an even greater strain on British supplies. One drastic measure the British took was, make sure you're seated for this, the 1939 Pet Massacre. That's right, anticipating a food shortage, people all across the UK started killing their cats and dogs so they would have fewer mouths to feed. People couldn't justify the, quote, luxury of a pet when their own lives and their country were at stake. Some pets were taken to professionals for destruction, while other owners completed the horrible job themselves. All in all, some 750,000 pets were killed in the British Pet Massacre. Though perhaps this was not an act of desperation so much as mass hysteria. The government implemented less dramatic measures to ensure that people didn't starve to death. One of such measures was rationing. The Ministry of Food implemented a system of rationing for many items, including but not limited to meats, eggs, milk, cheese, biscuits, and, God save us, tea. Later in the war, Britain established the Combined Food Board with the United States to help coordinate the supply of food to the Allies and import-starved Britain. Domestic food production also went up, with the British people creating so-called victory gardens on their home turf, just like they did in the US and other belligerent nations. Sports fields and golf courses became farms and vegetable patches. Even sections of Hyde Park in London were converted into arable plots. In a 1939 study conducted by Cambridge University physiologists Elsie Widdowson and Robert McCants, it was suggested that, even if the Germans destroyed 100% of British imports, the UK could persist on domestic food production without suffering from malnutrition. One of the main side effects of such a diet, which included a lot of bread and potatoes, would be a significant increase in flatulence and the size of people's poop. Lovely. With these measures in mind, it's safe to say that Britain wasn't hanging on by a thread in terms of food. The U-boat threat in the Atlantic wasn't eternal either. The Germans enjoyed two so-called happy times, tearing up British shipping after the nullification of the French Navy following the fall of France, and tearing up shipping bound for Britain after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. To put it in perspective, during the first happy time, from June 1940 and October 1940, 282 Allied merchant ships went down off the British coast, amounting to almost 1.5 million tons of merchant shipping. But by late 1943, the Allies had gained the upper hand in the Battle of the Atlantic by means of better tactics, such as increasing the size of escort groups, better air cover, better intel, notably through the cracking of enemy naval codes, better submarine detecting technologies like radar and sonar, better depth charges and other anti-submarine weapons, and a range of other factors. Later, Churchill wrote, "The only thing that really frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril." But with the US Navy standing in at Britain's side, the Germans were soon playing a losing game. While U-boats were attacking British shipping, the Luftwaffe hit Britain from the sky. While some 23,000 British civilians were killed in the Battle of Britain, and while a further 43,000 lost their lives in the Blitz, these German offensives didn't impact Britain's capacity to wage war as much as you might think. Flying against the Royal Air Force, which boasted skilled pilots and high morale, the Germans ultimately lost too many aircraft and experienced pilots to sustain their campaign. The Luftwaffe was supposed to soften Britain up for a German invasion, but the RAF and its allies fought valiantly in the defense of British military targets, vital infrastructure, and civilian lives. Britain's industrial output index dipped slightly in November and December of 1940, but actually increased most months after that. The Blitz, an attack on London designed to goad the RAF into a losing battle and destruction, was also a strategic failure. In the words of author Alfred Prince, "The truth of the matter, neither by attacking the airfields nor by attacking London was the Luftwaffe likely to destroy RAF fighter command. For the first time during the Second World War, the German war machine had set itself a major task which it patently failed to achieve." If Hitler hadn't directed the Luftwaffe against civilians, maintaining his focus on military targets and infrastructure instead, things may have been different. If the Luftwaffe had managed to destroy the RAF and soften Britain for an invasion, it still wouldn't have been the end of all things Britain. Churchill seemed to have meant it when he said, "We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills, we shall never surrender." too young or too old to fight in the regular British Army. As many as 1.5 million Brits volunteered for the Home Guard between May 1940 and December 1944, the period for which this citizen militia was active. Among other roles, their main jobs would be to stall the advance of a German invasion and, after the regular forces had regrouped, maintain control of the civilian population. Within the Home Guard were secret units trained for guerrilla warfare. These were known as auxiliary units, and they may have proved instrumental in the event of an invasion, as evinced by other guerrilla operations during the war, such as those in the Philippines and in Greece. In England, some 3,500 auxiliary unit personnel trained at Coles Hill House, learning how to use tools like silenced pistols, American Thompson SMGs, Fairbairn-Sykes fighting knives, and various explosives. Without some critical mistakes by the enemy and without its allies, notably the United States with its Lend-Lease policy, Britain may indeed have fallen in the Second World War. But Hitler did make mistakes, and Britain did have allies, and Churchill could always call upon the British Empire if it came down to a German invasion. While Britain lost its foothold in Europe early in the war, it remained a major player by fighting in the sea, the sky, and on overseas lands, notably in and in the vicinity of its imperial territory. We think the evidence points a certain way, but we'll leave the ultimate answer up to you. How close do you think Britain came to falling, and when do you think it came closest? Finally, can you think of any other examples that support the notion that Britain didn't come close to falling? Please feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below, and as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned something new.